This is Atonement, an interwoven tale of massive scams, murders, and the redemption of a con man, by Matthew B. Cox, narrated by Brian Wiggins. The AK-47 cracked, sending a 7.62 projectile spiraling down the assault rifle's barrel. It briefly traveled through the air, then plunged into the attractive 42-year-old blonde's chest. The round blew a dime-sized hole in her ribcage as it spiraled through the woman's upper torso and tore out of her back, leaving a silver dollar-size exit wound. Hours later, forensic examiners with Broward County would locate the mangled bullet lodged in the baseboard. The blonde immediately dropped to the living room floor. None of the neighbors in South Florida's exclusive plantation subdivision heard the shot, or at least they didn't report it. Terry Coolidge's lifeless body lied in an ever-increasing pool of blood on the wood floor as her fiancé, 46-year-old Royce Teets, stared down at her. The smoldering assault rifle clutched tight in his palms. Her eyes gazed into the abyss. Why Royce, a seemingly successful stockbroker, killed Terry Coolidge on July 10, 2016 is debatable. According to the police report, the couple had been arguing for several hours regarding Royce's drug addiction and infidelity. However, there is another explanation which the authorities failed to address. Specifically, Royce planned on killing his business partner, Joseph Vitale, a decision that Terry, due to her friendship with Vitale, was no doubt opposed to. As Terry's body lay motionless on the floor, Royce's cell rang. Vitale was minutes away. "Do me a favor," Royce said into the receiver. "Meet me in the back, at the dock." But Vitale wanted to come in and say hello to Terry. He had pictures of his 4th of July shenanigans that she just had to see. "She's sleeping," Royce retorted, looking down at his former fiancée. "Don't come to the front door. Walk around back to the dock." The request struck Vitale as odd. The partners' relationship had grown strained. In fact, weeks earlier, a mutual friend had confided that Royce was openly talking about having Vitale murdered. At the time, he hadn't taken the threat seriously. Now, however, at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, Royce was making odd requests to meet him at a secluded dock. "I don't know, Royce," replied Vitale wearily, turning his Ferrari California into the subdivision. "Something's not right." "Bro," spat Royce, "just meet me around back." Vitale could hear the desperation in his partner's voice as he swore, "I never hurt you. Terry loves you. You're like family." Whoa, thought Vitale. Who said anything about hurting me? I first noticed Joseph Vitale when he takes the seat next to me. It's Monday, March 26, 2018, our first day of the residential drug abuse program at the low-security prison in Coleman Federal Correctional Complex in Central Florida. I should probably mention that both Vitale and I are federal inmates, con men according to our respective prosecutors. As a part of Vitale's sentence, he is required to enroll in a drug treatment program. For good reason, admittedly, he has a drug and alcohol problem. Vitale is unquestionably handsome. At 32, the American Italian has short, dirty blonde hair, blue eyes, and the chiseled Romanesque features of a battle-hardened legionnaire. An Italian Chris Evans. He is in such good shape, in fact, I notice he somehow makes our typically unruly prison-issued hunter green uniform look stylish. While myself and the 20 other participants share our personal struggles with addiction and criminal behavior, over the next few weeks, I pick up that Vitale, a transplant from Long Island, New York, is charismatic and self-assured as well as gregarious. Over lunch in the cafeteria, sometime in late April, I mentioned to him that I've spent the last few years of my incarceration writing our fellow prisoners' true crime stories. I tell Vitale I'm currently working on an exposé entitled Devil Exposed. It involves a double murder. I glean a hint of something in his eye. Not curiosity or intrigue, but something darker. And I inquire, "You okay?" "A friend of mine was murdered," he says. I've heard bits and pieces of Vitale's criminal history. He's a non-violent offender incarcerated for fraud. They said it was an accidental overdose, but I know he was murdered." "How do you know?" Vitale glances up from his tray, his expression void of emotion, his gaze empty, and he confides, "Because I met the piece of shit that killed him." Isaac Grossman's silver Lamborghini Gallardo was sitting in the parking lot of an upscale restaurant in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, when Vitale and his girlfriend, Alicia Puglisi, arrived. It was summer 2005, and they were late for their double date with Alicia's friend, Erica, and Grossman, the guy she was seeing. He seemed like a nice enough guy, Vitale thought. A professional type, in his early 30s, that had the swagger of a man who had the world by the balls. Grossman was not only wearing an exquisite suit, but he was sporting Erica. Despite his wife and children, Grossman had been keeping her as his mistress for nearly a year. Grossman bought lots of drinks, and, as they finished dessert, he invited everyone to Auto Slim's, a trendy downtown club. Vitale and Alicia were headed to the parking lot in search of his aging Volkswagen Passat as the valet pulled to a stop in Grossman's Lambo. The 20-year-old Vitale distinctly recalls gawking at the over-the-top, high-gloss, black-rimmed, heart-pounding Italian bull, thinking, "I want this guy's life." "Nice car," was all he managed to say as Grossman helped Erica in. Vitale felt like a child, but he had to know. "What do you do?" "I'm a stockbroker." That night, while the girls were in the restroom, Grossman bragged that he made $100,000 on a bad month. Vitale, who'd moved south months earlier to pursue a degree in graphic design from Florida Atlantic University and was struggling financially, inquired how he could acquire a Lambo. The broker gave him the once-over, sized him up, and said, "I gotta see if you've got what it takes first." Grossman handed the starving artist a business card and added, "Call me next week." Monday afternoon, Vitale was seated across the desk from Grossman at the brokerage firm of Emmett A. Larkin. He'd toured the office and seen the brokers, young, good-looking guys just like him, in their crisp suits chattering into headsets, making pitches and closing deals. Vitale thought it looked like a scene out of the movie Wall Street or Boiler Room. Big money was being made. Vitale could see that, and he wanted in. Grossman went over the firm's training program. "You'll be paid $200 per week, and you'll call prospective clients under my license." Once Vitale opened 50 accounts for the firm, they would schedule his Series 7. "If you pass, we'll give you 20 of the accounts back." "When do I start?" "Right now." Vitale's mother and father were furious. "My dad's a super conservative Italian immigrant," admits Vitale. His parents had hoped their son would get a college degree in a safe, secure industry and get a stable job. He wasn't all that thrilled about the graphic design degree. You can imagine how he felt about me ditching school to be a broker. Specifically, according to Vitale, his father warned that if he dropped out of FAU, he'd cut him off financially. He said, "You do this and you're on your own." "You quit anyway?" I interject. Agitated, Vitale throws his hands in the air. "Grossman was driving a Lamborghini. A fucking Lamborghini!" There are two parts of the stock brokerage business. One, acquiring new clients or new accounts. This requires cold calling leads, potential customers, and pitching them on investing with the firm. If they seem remotely interested, the potential client is handed off to a broker who persuades the potential client to open an account for whatever amount they can squeeze out of the firm's new client. Step 2 necessitates the account to be managed by a broker or trader. Stocks had to be evaluated. Companies and trends had to be studied as potential investments. "I'm dealing with too many brokers as it is," sighed Vitale's potential client. It was Vitale's first day on working the phones, and he'd just recommended 1,000 shares of Portaplayer, a manufacturer of semiconductors. "I can't do it." Over the last week, he'd sat and listened to several brokers call leads. Vitale had picked up bits and pieces of the business. He'd memorized the script and multiple rebuttals. However, he was only supposed to be making soft inquiries as to potential clients' interest in opening an account with the firm, not hard closes on particular stocks. "You've got too many brokers because you haven't found the right one," pounced Vitale, repeating a rebuttal he'd heard a senior broker use. "I work with 350 clients that I've cherry-picked in 48 states, including the senior vice president of Hewlett-Packard, Randy Mott, and Guy Harrison with IBM. I'm the guy that can make you money day in and day out again and again." Okay, interrupted the potential client. "I'll do 500 shares. That was the unlicensed trainee's first new account and sale. Typical trainees take over 6 months to open up the required 50 new accounts. Vitale did it in 3 weeks. "Grossman and his partners thought I was a rainmaker," admits Vitale during one of our many discussions, which eventually turned into interviews for his true crime. "But the other brokers started hating me. I was opening 2, sometimes 3 accounts a day. One day I did 12. The other guys despised me." He passed his Series 7 exam in early 2006, allowing him to solicit business under his own name, trade stocks, bonds, and options. Shortly thereafter, he obtained his Series 63, giving him the ability to work in every state. Vitale could see the commissions being generated based on the accounts he'd handed off to Grossman and his partners. "They never gave me the 20 accounts they'd promised," he says. According to Vitale, part of the firm's business model was to screw their trainees out of their accounts. "It's a brutal industry, but I didn't complain. I was just trying to hang on until I could build up a book of business." "How are you paying your bills?" "I wasn't," he admits. By the time he'd obtained his licenses, Vitale had been evicted from his apartment. Alicia had gone back to New York. I was living out of my car and showering at LA Fitness, but it didn't matter, because I knew I'd found an industry where I could excel. Then the bottom fell out. Erica, Grossman's mistress, called his wife and sent her pictures of she and Grossman having sex. The marriage began to deteriorate, as well as Grossman's relationship with his business partners. "These guys and their wives were all friends," says Vitale. "They wanted Grossman to stop seeing Erica or resign from the firm. The affair tore his world apart, and because Vitale was Grossman's protege, his employment at the firm became tenuous." The supple leather chairs, mahogany table, and expensive commercial carpet in the conference room at Intercap Wealth Management radiated blue-chip stability, even if the brokers occupying the chamber didn't. "$250,000, snapped Grossman at Intercap's regional manager. "You get me, Mr. Vitale," he motioned to Vitale seated beside him at the conference table, "and our entire book of business." "We're willing to do 175, he replied. It was a solid signing bonus, and Vitale was ready to take it, but Grossman continued to push for the $250,000. He'd agreed to split everything 50-50 with Vitale if he'd abandon Emmett Larkin. Grossman moved him into his new bachelor pad. However, Vitale was still struggling financially. "Can't do it," retorted Grossman. He assured the manager their book contained several hundred accounts, wealthy clients that trusted them implicitly. The statement was nowhere near accurate, but Vitale remained stone-faced. "We'll make you double that in the first quarter." Grossman sighed in frustration and added, "This is starting to feel like a waste of time." $200,000, growled the manager. He leaned forward and extended his hand. $200,000, and you and Mr. Vitale start tomorrow. Grossman smiled, stood, and the two shook hands. Vitale had just made his first $100,000. They started calling their clients and persuading them to move their accounts to Intercap. Vitale opened nearly 15 accounts the first day, and by the end of the first month, they had made $114,000 in commissions. Unfortunately, due to Grossman's cocaine addiction, coupled with his inability to keep appointments, cracks began to show. Within several months, Grossman and Intercap's manager got into a massive argument. This led to he and Vitale quitting. They moved to iTrade Direct, but were thrown out after 2 months, once again due to Grossman's erratic behavior. This time, they landed positions with the firm of J.P. Turner, a boiler room swimming with alpha males. hard-closing adrenaline junkies, cold-calling bad leads, 60 to 70 hours a week. Vitale gave Grossman a stiff lecture. "Cut the shit, bro," he told him. "This is the last time I'm following you anywhere." "I got it," agreed Grossman. He gave him some half-assed excuse and assured Vitale. "I've been having a bad time, but I'm back, bro. I'm back." They dug in and quickly rose to the top of the pack. Over the next year, they averaged unheard-of commissions, according to Vitale, in excess of $100,000 per month. He got his own place and bought a black, heart-pounding 500-horsepower BMW M6. Life was getting good. The brokerage industry as a whole, according to Vitale, is designed to look professional, conservative, stable, and above all, trustworthy. But he quickly learned it's teeming with questionable characters. Degenerate gamblers, alcoholics, drug addicts, functioning addicts like Grossman, he says, but they're still addicts. And I was no exception. The average broker's day starts around 6 a.m., assuming he ever went to sleep, with several cups of coffee and some cocaine, confesses Vitale. He might analyze some financial reports and put in a few trades. Around 9, you start smashing out calls to doctors, lawyers, business owners, anyone with the ability to invest big money. More coke at lunch. Basically, you're doing coke throughout the day. Everyone's driving a Mercedes or a Porsche or a Lambo. What about after work? I interrupt. After? Vitale hesitates. I could see he's questioning how much to disclose, and I remind him that he agreed to tell me everything. Strip clubs and hookers. You don't have time to do anything else. Drugs, strip clubs, prostitutes, sports cars, and lots of money. That's why so many of these guys end up in rehabs and divorced, getting DUIs or killing themselves in car accidents. It's fucking chaos. In fact, despite that his parents had come around once Vitale appeared to be doing well, his lifestyle remained a constant point of contention. He seldom answered his father's calls or emails and missed numerous family functions. Look, at this time, Vitale's answer trails off as he searches for an acceptable excuse. However, we both know there isn't one. I was so busy, and so, I neglected my family. But that was the lifestyle, not me. That was the life of a high-pressure broker. Grossman started missing appointments, blowing off work, and not returning calls. By the end of the year, he was only coming in 1 day a week. His absentees got so bad that the firm's manager started transferring clients to Vitale, who didn't have any idea how to trade stocks. "He never taught me that part of the business," says Vitale. "The truth is, he didn't want me to know how to trade. He was getting half of everything I brought in." Grossman would invest the client's money into a stock, and he and Vitale would split the commission. It didn't matter if it made money or not. Over the next few months, Vitale simultaneously brought in new accounts while teaching himself to trade. Eventually, Vitale was running his and Grossman's accounts, raising money, analyzing stocks, and making the trades. "What did Grossman say about that?" I ask. "He wasn't happy about it," confesses Vitale. However, Grossman was doing Roxy's, oxycodone, and cocaine to excess, as well as not coming into work on a regular basis. The manager got tired of it. There was a big argument, and he fired Grossman. This time, however, the younger broker refused to abandon ship. He'd come to the conclusion that, despite Grossman's experience, he was better off without him. He buckled down and hit the phones. Over the next year, he raked in hundreds of new accounts as well as massive commissions. By mid-2008, the Dow Jones Industrial Average Index was in freefall. Between Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley alone, there were reported losses of over $4.1 trillion. Roughly 30% of the U.S. GDP for 2007 had vanished and the entire financial system was melting down. New business slowed considerably. Clients started pulling out of the market and liquidating their assets. Regardless of the financial crisis, Vitale didn't feel the pinch nearly as much as his brethren, specifically because he moved his clients' assets into ultra-shorts. In fact, in November 2008, he made J.P. Turner's heavy hitters list. Out of the firm's 20,000 brokers nationwide, Vitale ranked among the top 10. The banks had stopped extending credit, and businesses were desperate for cash. The opportunist in Vitale recognized the potential to capitalize on the lack of liquidity. He resigned from J.P. Turner and began making calls to private equity firms. Vitale ended up taking a position with Balfour Management, which came with a signing bonus, a yellow Lamborghini Gallardo, and a 25% commission on everything he raised. The exorbitant commission structure, like most of the private equity industry, was sketchy. Due to the excessive amount of the commissions, firms typically don't disclose the size of their commissions to their investors, thereby making it illegal, yet highly lucrative. The offices of Balfour Management were located on the 14th floor of the Bank of America building in Fort Lauderdale, just below Scott Rothstein's office. Coincidentally, during the same time period, Rothstein ran the largest Ponzi scheme in Florida history. Vitale brought in several of his own brokers, heavy hitters like himself, and the team began cranking out calls. Within the first 2 months, they'd raised over $2 million for Helix Wind, a company out of California that manufactured computer chips, as well as bringing in several $1 million for multiple other companies. Vitale was 23 and living like a rock star. The long-legged blonde bombshell that sauntered into the Solid Gold Gentlemen's Club in February 2009 was not a stripper, although she was deep into the sex trade. Michelle Braun, with her enhanced Angelina Jolie lips and Pamela Anderson breasts, was synthetically attractive in an excessive plastic surgery kind of way. The Barbie doll beautiful Braun was smart and confident to the point of being cocky. She'd spent more than a decade running the exclusive members-only escort services, Niecy's Girls and Bella Models. Specifically, Braun had taken the escort business to a new level of profitability by connecting Playboy models and porn stars with wealthy actors and sports stars like Charlie Sheen, Mickey Rourke, Courtney Love, Tiger Woods, and Jose Canseco, as well as Russian oligarchs and princes from Dubai to Istanbul. During Braun's tenure, she'd made nearly $9 million. However, due to an ongoing federal investigation and media interest in her high-profile clientele, the high-end cyber madam had recently fallen on hard times. She was desperate, but when Braun stepped into Solid Gold that February, she had a plan. Braun recognized Vitale by his signature three-piece suit. He was seated in a private area near the stage along with several of his brokers, surrounded by 6 gorgeous Solid Gold exotic dancers. The group was half drunk, lit up on cocaine, and watching multiple dancers work the stripper poles on stage when Braun tapped Vitale on the shoulder. "Is that your Lamborghini outside?" she yelled over the club's music. Vitale proudly admitted the European supercar was, in fact, his. The long-legged blonde threw out her hand and introduced herself as an equity financier, an individual who acts as an intermediary between investment bankers and companies in need of financing. In addition, Braun confided she was John Boyle's girlfriend. "He told me I should talk to you. It's regarding startup capital for a project I'm shepherding." Boyle was a wealthy trust fund scion, heir to his family's lucrative development company, worth several $100 million, and highly respected. As such, Vitale had no reason to doubt Braun's credibility. "Sure, I know John," he replied, a little shocked that Braun had approached him in a strip club. "But maybe we should meet at my office tomorrow morning." Vitale walked Braun outside and handed her his business card. Admittedly, he was impressed by her confidence and the black Rolls-Royce Phantom she drove off in. The next morning, Braun laid out the opportunity. An alternative energy company, Agro Energy, had a revolutionary refining technique to convert algae into biodiesel fuel. "We need to raise $5 million, she confessed. "Can you do 5? "If it's sound," Vitale replied. "Yeah, I could do 5. Braun scheduled a meeting with Agro Energy's CFO, Mark Yagala, and Professor Jacob Gitman, Ph.D. The professor was not only in charge of the science and manufacturing behind the company, he was also the owner. Days later, Vitale and Braun arrived at the Miami office building. Both Yagala and Gitman were already seated at the table in the conference room when the secretary led Vitale and Braun in. Introductions were made, the professor handed everyone some promotional material, and went into the science behind the refinement process. He gave specifics on how the $5 million would be spent, including the construction of a prototype factory outside of Miami, the custom equipment necessary for the refinement process, and operational expenses. "It was an impressive presentation," admits Vitale. No red flags went up. The professor, Gitman, seemed extremely knowledgeable. Yagala, the CFO, said very little, but he seemed professional. I had a good feeling about it. Braun called Vitale over the next several days, attempting to pressure him into committing to the project. He had his attorney conduct a background check on Professor Gitman, AgroEnergy's owner, but never considered looking into its CFO or the pushy equity financier. Less than a week later, Vitale's lawyer informed him that Gitman as well as the company were solid. Vitale was in the midst of several projects. However, he told Braun that he'd agreed to raise the capital for a 25% commission. Once we reach 5, he explained, we'll do another raise to bridge any gaps in capital. The next morning, she showed up at his office with all of the paperwork, private placement memorandum, subscription agreement, everything he'd requested. All you got to do is sign, said Braun, and she thrust a pen at him. Braun insisted they open a corporation, Sterling Capital Trust LLC, to collect the investor funds, which, as the LLC's vice president, she would release to AgroEnergy as they assigned the investors stock certificates. It made sense to the seasoned broker. In fact, Vitale personally accompanied Braun to TD Bank to open the corporate account. AgroEnergy, I have no doubt, will be the next ExxonMobil, said Yagala, the company's CFO, during a gathering of Vitale's brokers at his office in the Bank of America building on April 6, 2009. He handed out promotional material and answered questions. According to Vitale, Yagala delivered one of the most informative and concise presentations he'd ever heard in connection with the startup's growth potential. The brokers were so energized by the explosive numbers they started smashing the phones, cold calling potential investors up to 10 hours a day for a month straight, and the money began coming in. Sterling Capital had raised over $450,000 of AgroEnergy's required $5 million when the team manager, Brian Dunleavy, informed Vitale, "There's an investor on line 6 for you." It seemed like a benign call from an investor. He'd put $30,000 into AgroEnergy. "It's been over 30 days and I still haven't received my stock certificates. I should have gotten them by now." "Yes, sir," agreed Vitale. "You should have." He promised to look into the delay and get back with him. Vitale didn't know it yet, but that call was the first rumble of what would become an avalanche that would irrevocably derail the remainder of Vitale's life. Over the next 2 days, Vitale sent Braun several emails inquiring when she planned to issue the certificates, with no response. As more investors requested the documents, Vitale began frantically firing off emails and leaving voice messages. But Braun couldn't be reached. Finally, after realizing she'd changed the online password, thereby locking Vitale out to Sterling Capital's account, he drove to TD Bank and spoke with the manager. She pulled up the account's most recent transactions. Out of the $450,000 raised, Braun had drained $370,000. Puppy Palace got $2,000, $20,000 went to the local Mercedes dealer, $7,500 for her rent, Club Live got $15,000, and the remainder was spent on a massive designer shopping spree, leaving a balance of $80,000. At the sight of it, Vitale's stomach tightened into a knot, and the room spun around him as desperation set in. In a panic, he punched in the number of AgroEnergy's CFO. "Mr. Yagala, this is Joe Vitale. She spent the money," he sputtered. "Michelle Braun, your equity financier, spent it." "What money?" replied Yagala. According to the CFO, Braun had told him that Vitale's team hadn't started the raise. Vitale frantically described the situation, his main concern being, "I owe my clients $450,000 of AgroEnergy stock." Standing in the bank's parking lot, staring at his Lamborghini, his mind drifted to his old Volkswagen Passat, and he said, "I've got to call the FBI." "Wait a minute now, let's not involve the authorities just yet." Yagala was concerned that the energy company's name might be damaged by an investigation, making it impossible to raise the $5 million they still needed. He suggested that Vitale wire him the remaining $80,000, and he would issue the $450,000 in stock out of his personal shares. "But you have to keep this between us. The professor would never approve." "Of course," he said, "of course." Vitale immediately stepped into the bank and instructed the manager to wire Yagala the account's remaining balance. Everything's going to work out, he told himself. Unfortunately, when Vitale called the company's CFO the next morning to arrange for the stock to be assigned, Yagala failed to return any of his messages. By the end of the workday, Vitale had come to the conclusion that Yagala, Braun, and the money were gone. He'd been conned. "Wait a second," I interrupt. "That's all they got? $450,000? Vitale and I are seated in an area within the low-security prison's recreation center. In the distance, past the fences and razor wire, the sun is sinking behind one of the Coleman complex's 2 penitentiaries. "Yeah," he confesses. "She and Yagala got $450. You got lucky."
I point out that had Braun simply fabricated the agro-energy stock certificates and issued them to the investors, they wouldn't have known the difference and you wouldn't have gotten tipped off. You would have raised the whole $5 million. Absolutely, says Vitale. He estimated that within 6 to 10 months, he and his team would have raised the capital. See, that bothers me, I admit. As a con man, I'm personally offended that Braun didn't perform the basic maintenance required to maximize the take. She left over $4.5 million on the table. It's just sloppy, unprofessional. She could have gotten you for the whole $5 million. Vitale stares blankly, dumbfounded, his brow half-arched and his lips slightly ajar. Unmoved, I continue. I'm just saying. I'd have gotten you for the whole $5 million.
Sitting in his attorney's office in June 2009, Vitale described how thoroughly Braun had duped him. He'd already repaid $250,000, out of his own pocket, to the investors that he had contact information on. However, the remaining client's contact information was in Braun's laptop, but she'd disappeared. Calling the authorities is out, said the lawyer. Vitale had opened the company. He was listed as the CEO. Opened the corporate account, raised all of the capital, and then personally wired the last of his funds to Yagala, one of the conspirators. They're absolutely going to conclude that you're involved. So what do? You need to get that laptop. On Vitale's way out, he called Braun's cell and left her a message pleading with her to email him the client's contact info as well as the amount each had invested. I'll pay him back, he explained. You can keep the money. Still, she didn't respond. No email, text, or voice message. Just radio silence. Desperate to find a solution, Vitale called Professor Gitman at the office. He told him he was trying to reach Yagala. Who? He replied. Yagala, your chief financial officer. Vitale reminded him that Yagala had been at the professor's presentation months earlier. Mark Yagala, he's the company's CFO. I don't have a CFO, Gitman stated emphatically. That guy was with you and Ms. Braun. In fact, the professor informed Vitale that Yagala had arrived shortly before he and Braun. He further revealed that Braun had told him that Vitale had passed on the opportunity to raise the $5 million in capital. No, that's not true, stammered Vitale. We're in the middle of the raise right now, but Michelle Braun and Yagala stole the money. He rambled off the events of the past 2 weeks, including his desperate attempt to locate Braun or Yagala so he could repay the investors. Unfortunately, the professor wasn't in a position to help. I'm sorry, Mr. Vitale. It sounds like you've been the victim of an elaborate confidence game. Unbeknownst to Vitale, Gitman was so unnerved by what he'd heard, within minutes of finishing the call, he notified Broward County Sheriff's Office of the incident. This sparked an investigation into Sterling Capital Trust, LLC, its chief executive officer, Joseph Vitale, and Michelle Braun, the company's vice president. Over cold tater tots and burnt veggie burgers in the prison's cafeteria, Vitale explains that, due to Braun's refusal to provide him with the investor's info, he was unable to repay all of the stolen funds. Every few months I'd get a call asking if we'd done the raise for Agro, says Vitale. I'd explain that there'd been an issue, I'd apologize and wire them their money back, but they weren't all able to track me down. With no clear solution, all he could do was hope that, eventually, all of Agro Energy's investors would reach out to me. You were in a bad spot, I offer. It was like a black cloud over me, replies Vitale. Eventually, though, I put it behind me and I just kept doing what I do. Vitale's new pearl-white Lamborghini Murcielago was parked in the garage, wedged between his white Mercedes and black Lexus, of his $2.8 million beachfront home. All 10,000 square feet of the opulent Mediterranean had been decorated for Vitale's New Year's Eve black tie blowout. There were live mermaids in the pool, fire dancers walking the premises, top-shelf caterers serving, and 2 fully stocked open bars. Naked escorts were available in the upstairs bedrooms and cocaine in the master suite. It was, according to Vitale, complete decadence and debauchery. I dropped $40,000 on the entertainment alone, not including the hookers. 500 guests, South Florida socialites, businessmen, and investors, stood shoulder to shoulder to bring in 2010. While he watched the ball drop on his monster flat screen, Vitale thought, with the exception of the Michelle Braun thing, I've had a pretty fucking amazing year. He'd raised $10 million in capital for a technology company out of North Florida and was in the middle of raising $7 million for an internet streaming startup. I love my life, he told himself, and it's only going to get better. The U.S. Marshals kicked in the front door at 8 a.m. in early 2011. They had a warrant for Vitale's arrest. He'd been charged by the state of Florida with unlawful operation of a boiler room. Regardless, the marshals had missed him. Coincidentally, Vitale had stayed the night at a girlfriend's place. As a result, he wasn't home during the raid. After his criminal attorney had arranged for bond, a month later, Vitale turned himself in to Broward County Sheriff's Department. He was booked, photographed, fingerprinted, and released within hours. Over the course of a couple years, he and his co-defendants' lawyers negotiated a variety of plea bargains. Vitale agreed to serve 1 year of home confinement, 4 years probation, and pay $105,000, the outstanding balance owed to the victims. Despite the fact that Braun was the ringleader of the stock scam, in addition to having recently pled guilty to charges of transporting an individual for the purpose of prostitution and money laundering in federal court, amazingly, she was granted the same deal as Vitale. The bulk of Vitale and Braun's 6 additional co-defendants received similar sentences. Brian Dunleavy, the team manager, however, refused to accept a deal, instead opting to throw himself on the mercy of the court. He received 15 years. According to Vitale, Dunleavy had done nothing more than fall for Braun's scam. Miraculously, Yagala, who was already on federal probation for a fraud charge, somehow managed to avoid being indicted altogether. Fresh off house arrest, Vitale and his girl, Marushi Carrera, a hard-bodied Ecuadorian beauty in her 30s he'd recently gotten serious with, were sprawled out in lounge chairs at Fort Lauderdale Beach. Her 3-year-old son sat nearby playing. Tourists and locals were enjoying a children's festival with clowns making balloon animals, cotton candy, and ices several hundred yards away. Close to 20 bouncy houses and water slides littered the dunes. It was Memorial Day 2015, and Vitale was watching Marushi's son build a sandcastle when he noticed a large tornado coming in from the ocean. That's odd, he thought, as the storm system reached land near the festival. Vitale had never seen anything like it, nor did he understand the strength of the weather anomaly. Before he realized the danger, parents and children began to scream as the lightweight bouncy houses and slides started to teeter and shift in the wind. Suddenly, one of the bouncy houses, packed with over a dozen kids, was lifted off the ground by the tornado and launched 90 feet into the storm's spiral. The structure traveled through the air, over the beach, and dropped into the traffic on Ocean Drive. Multiple kids received injuries ranging from scratches to broken bones. However, all of the children survived. That's where I saw Royce Teets at a restaurant on the beach, Vitale informs me, right after the bouncy house thing. They'd worked together several years earlier on a raise, but hadn't spoken since. Royce told me he had a nice office downtown and 10 brokers working for him. The firm specialized in raises for exempt private offerings. As a result, none of the brokers needed their Series 7. Royce said he was kicking ass. Still, he needed a superstar like Vitale to take it to the next level. He suggested they become partners, but I declined. Vitale was on state probation and reluctant to get involved. Royce understood his dilemma, and he suggested that he simply use an alias. Vitale was still apprehensive, however, he hadn't worked in over a year, and his savings were dwindling. He agreed to stop by and check out the operation. Royce's guys were working the phones, pitching prospective investors. It got my adrenaline pumping, and I immediately knew I wanted in, says Vitale. Out of the gate, my first month, I opened 40 new accounts. Made $50,000 like it was nothing. I hadn't realized how much I missed it, and then, it was on. Understand, the governor's restraining Vitale, such as the threat of losing his license and damaging his reputation, vanished the moment he became a felon and actually lost his licenses. Additionally, using the alias Donovan Kelly and working on non-registered raises only amplified his reckless behavior. Vitale admits, I'd say anything, short of promising clients a guaranteed return, to open an account. Once the money started coming in, Vitale began teaching the other brokers how to pitch deals using a variety of closing techniques. The economic close, the takeaway close, the soft close, the hard close. After a while, the place was a fucking powerhouse, a real live boiler room, raising tens of millions. 9 out of 10 startups fail, admitted Vitale. Those are the stats. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and the hardcore brokers were working the phones, smashing potential investors. Vitale let the statement sink in, and he closed with, "But in my professional opinion, this is the startup that makes it. This is the next Apple, the next FedEx, the next Facebook, the next Twitter. This is the investment that makes you a millionaire. Or not. There's nothing wrong with being middle class. Guys like you are the backbone of this country." The potential client emptied out his IRA and invested $33,000. Vitale has no idea what became of the startup. However, he did recall that his father called the next morning to remind him that he'd promised to be at his house by 4 p.m. for Thanksgiving dinner. "Of course I'll be there," Vitale assured him, lying in bed hungover and groggy. "4, no problem." "You sure?" his father asked. "We're all here." "Of course." Unfortunately, by the time Vitale was on the interstate, he'd done a few lines of cocaine and was in no mood for dinner with the family. Then he saw a billboard for the Hard Rock Casino. No, he thought, they can't be open on Thanksgiving. Sure enough, when he pulled his Lamborghini up to the valet, the guy said they were open. Vitale spent that night losing $25,000 on blackjack while directing his father's calls to voicemail. "Me and Royce were never really cool," says Vitale. "He was always talking shit about people. That guy's a fucking idiot, or she's a whore. It got old real quick." The other issue Vitale had with Royce was his propensity to act like he was some type of mobster. He'd make comments about loyalty, or how he'd like to stick a fucking bomb in some disloyal broker's Porsche or pop a hole in a competing venture capitalist's head. That just wasn't cool. I'm not a gangster, and I didn't want to hang out with someone who thought he was. Once, Vitale tells me, he and Royce were drinking at the office, and his partner explained Florida's castle law, which states that if someone is on his or her property and they feel threatened by an individual, the property owner has the right, by law, to use deadly force. "Nah," replied Vitale. "That can't be right. You can't just kill someone." "Bro, they've got this castle law and the stand your ground law," said Royce. "This isn't New York or California. This is the South. These hillbillies shoot each other all the time. It's not that hard to get away with murder down here." It wasn't the defining factor as to why Vitale disliked Royce. However, the conversation is worth noting. Working that pole can't be easy, thought Vitale, unabashedly staring at the stripper on stage at Scarlett's Gentlemen's Club. He and Marushi watched from the VIP section as the dancer straddled the cylindrical chrome and then slowly spun around the prop, gently coming to her feet. She gave Vitale a girlish wave as she sashayed down the catwalk. The instant she disappeared behind the curtain, 3 more strippers sauntered out. Vanessa Noriega and a few of her friends were seated near Vitale and his girl inside the exclusive area of the club. Vanessa was an attractive 30-year-old brunette Latina, a younger, more street version of Jennifer Lopez. Her diamond-studded grill, tight designer outfit, and brash ghetto attitude let everyone know she had some money, but she was also a little dangerous. Despite the description, according to Vitale, there was something sexy about V. Throughout the night, the groups merged, and Vitale ended up doing several lines of cocaine with Vanessa in the restroom. She slipped him her number and indicated she always had weed and blow. From then on, Vanessa was always around. She'd stop by the office, flirt with the guys, give blowjobs in the back room, and hook up with everyone at the various strip clubs after work. Before long, Vanessa was supplying half the brokers with whatever drugs they wanted. "LottoNet," announced Royce. "It's a tech company." He and Vitale were standing in Royce's private office far from the shouting and turmoil of the brokers in the bullpen. Staring out of the window at the federal building, which housed the FBI and the federal courthouse, among other government agencies, Vitale realized Royce was hungover. "I need you to close this guy. It's a great opportunity." 20 minutes later, the owner of LottoNet, David Gray, stopped by the office. Gray was a computer geek cut with some frat boy cocky.
He described the company as a concierge service that gave customers the ability to play all the state lotteries using their web app. It was a compelling presentation, and the statistics were astonishing. So much so that Vitale made it a point to jot them down. Gray had a solid concept, and he knew it. "What I want to know," asked the startup's owner, his eyes pinging between Royce and Vitale, "can you guys raise the $5 million or not?" Vitale scrunched his upper lip into a snicker. Earlier in the day, he'd spoken with a potential investor he'd yet to pitch a private placement. He dialed the lead's number and placed him on speakerphone. "Dan," he pounced before the investor could answer. "I don't have a lot of time. An opportunity just hit my desk. Atonement. Tech company with massive revenue potential." Vitale glanced at the figures he'd scribbled minutes earlier and rambled off the number in an adrenaline-infused, polished, non-stop pitch. $292 million to spend on U.S.-based lotteries per day. Now, hypothetically, if LottoNet were to capture a 1% share, that'd come to $30 million a day in gross revenues, which, on a $50,000 investment, would equal $53,000 per month. Again, persuaded hypothetically. Vitale never even gave the investor an opportunity to comment before he hit him with, "Look, Dan, I've got 40 other investors to call today. Are you in or out?" "I'm in," he enthusiastically replied. "I'm in. Send me the wiring instructions." Vitale transferred the call to the office manager, turned to Gray and asked, "My question to you is, are you ready to do this?" Royce agreed to a 50-50 partnership on the LottoNet raise after Vitale persuaded Gray to entertain a double equity raise consisting of an initial raise of $5 million, followed by a second raise of $5 million, totaling $10 million at a 40% commission. It took 2 months for the LottoNet app to go up, but once it did, the floodgates opened. Within months, Vitale and the brokers had raked in $3 million. Royce, however, had only raised $12,500 of it. That was in December 2015, recalls Vitale. Royce had taken his girlfriend, Terry Coolidge, to Italy where he'd bought her a 4.9-carat engagement ring. Which was great, because I loved Terry. But he started doing more and more drugs, coke, oxys, Adderall, alcohol. After that, he stopped coming in. He became useless. "Where's my nigger?" yelled the chunky white 70-year-old Vitale knew as Old Man Bruce. "Get me my nigger!" One of his 4 private security personnel immediately moved to find the strip club manager. Another security guard exited the club to get the supplies. Vitale had been dragged to the VIP area by one of the solid gold dancers an hour earlier. Old Man Bruce wanted some cocaine, and all the girls knew that Vitale typically had some on him. Subsequently, he'd joined the party made up of 4 bodyguards, nearly a dozen exotic dancers, a couple of the old man's associates, and an aging multimillionaire, one of the majority shareholders in Home Depot worth nearly $500 million, that was insistent on getting his hands on an African-American dancer. Vitale turned to the stripper next to him. She was snorting a line of cocaine off the table, and he asked, "What's going on?" She wiped her nose, did a hair flip, and giggled. "Yeah, so Bruce has got a thing he does with the black girls. He likes to paint 'em white and do 'em doggy in the back room." "Seriously?" gasped Vitale. "How often does he do this?" Suddenly, the manager appeared with a gorgeous African-American dancer, accompanied by one of Bruce's bodyguards holding a 5-gallon paint bucket and some painting equipment. He pulled off the lid, placed a screen inside the container, and handed a paint roller to Bruce. Vitale's companion leaned into him and whispered, "Here he goes." The black dancer slipped off her bikini and stepped in front of the 70-year-old seated in his chair. She stared down at him as he worked the roller over her naked body. The old man slopped white paint all over the stripper as well as the carpet, himself, and the chair. It all happened so fast, Vitale was still reeling from the use of the N-word and Bruce's poor painting skills when his cell rang. It was his father, but he wasn't about to take the call. Vitale was too coked up and too appalled by what he was witnessing to deal with his father. Vitale noticed that she was coming out more like a zebra than a white girl. But she didn't seem offended. In fact, she couldn't stop grinning and laughing. Even stranger than the spectacle was that no one else seemed shocked. Not the security guards, the manager, or the other dancers. They'd seen it all before. "I cannot fucking believe this is my life," thought Vitale. "This is insanity." Vitale's new boiler room was straight out of The Wolf of Wall Street, a massive 5,000 square foot office space and an additional 3,500 feet housing LottoNet's tech support and new headquarters. All of it equipped with modern office furniture and state-of-the-art computers. The soul of the operation, however, were the 20 guys, fronters, new account openers, and loaders in the bullpen. Each and every one of them cranking out call after call to potential clients using a variety of high-pressure tactics, rattling off scripted pitches into headsets hour after hour after hour. Vanessa, of course, was always in and out of the place, dropping off cocaine, marijuana, or whatever the brokers needed to keep them pushing LottoNet stock. The best part of the new office, according to Vitale, wasn't the pool table or the full bar, it was the stage he'd had installed, complete with a stripper pole. Anthony Calavopi looked vaguely familiar as he approached Vitale's $100,000 custom-made Jeep Wrangler at Hollywood International Airport's express lane. Vitale had met Calavopi months earlier through a potential client, Thomas Jacobson out of Texas, whom he'd pitched LottoNet. The Texan liked what he'd heard. However, he wanted Vitale to run it by his financial advisor. Calavopi was out of Las Vegas and, despite being in competing industries, after a 3-hour phone call wherein they battled over public versus private stocks, IPOs, and the viability of emerging markets, Vitale sold him on LottoNet. In fact, Calavopi was so taken with the opportunity, not only did he advise Jacobson to invest, he agreed to pitch the startup to his entire client pool. Over the next 2 months, Vitale and Calavopi pitched 20 of his clients, raising $1.5 million while building a strong, long-distance friendship. But they never met in person. After the $1.5 million, however, Vitale invited Calavopi to come see his operation. He wanted him to be a part of the team. Still, he definitely recognized Calavopi from somewhere. So, before getting out of the Jeep, Vitale whipped out his smartphone and surreptitiously snapped a photo of him. That night, after dropping Calavopi and his fiancée, Catherine O'Brien, off, Vitale stopped by Royce's place. It was 7 p.m., and he was already drunk. Regardless, Vitale showed him the photo and questioned if he recognized Calavopi. According to Vitale, Royce turned white and slurred, "This a joke? That's my mentor, Frank Nuzzo. I showed you his mugshot." Vitale recalled that Royce had pulled up Nuzzo's booking photo, domestic violence, while describing their failed business relationship. "He ripped me off. The guy's a scumbag." Based on his experience, Vitale doubted Royce's word. Nuzzo, other than the use of an alias, had never lied to him, in addition to being a workhorse that had just raised $1.5 million for LottoNet. Royce, however, hadn't lived up to one of the multitude of promises he'd made to Vitale. "We need this guy," he stated. "He's a fucking machine." "No," Royce grunted defiantly. "He's evil. I don't want him around." "Evil? What the fuck are you talking about? I'm not asking your permission," replied Vitale. He then brought up the fact that Royce didn't even come into the office anymore. "You're not pulling your weight, and this guy, Nuzzo, is. He's a closer, and he's staying." 2 days later, Nuzzo and Vitale were in a meeting with Gray discussing the second raise. Nuzzo was pushing for an alternative script when Royce stumbled into the conference room, drunk. He began griping that Nuzzo had fucked him over. "I carried you, Royce," he replied. "You couldn't close a door, let alone a deal without me. You're a bureaucrat." "Fuck you!" shouted Royce. "No, fuck! Royce lost his track of thought and snarled, "Yeah, fuck you!" Then he staggered out of the room and exited the building. Vitale called Royce later that night and informed him he was no longer welcome at the office. Royce was making a ton of money for doing absolutely nothing. Vitale instructed him to stay home and stay out of the way. Professional courtesy is how Vitale described it. "You know, both Nuzzo and I were using aliases," he tells me while we wait for one of our classes to start. Although Vitale was aware of Nuzzo's real name and Nuzzo was aware of Vitale's, neither of the con men ever let on that they were aware of the other's true identity. He's calling me Donovan Kelly, and I'm calling him Anthony Calavopi, and it's like we both know. Vitale laughs at the absurdity of the situation and continues, "But because we're professionals, we say nothing." Vitale reflects on the situation and adds, "I love that guy." Vanessa and several of the brokers were already at Diamond Doll's strip club when Vitale and Nuzzo arrived. It was after 8 p.m. on the first Friday in August 2016, and they were celebrating. Vitale and Nuzzo had raised over $1 million in less than 2 weeks. In the midst of ogling the exotic dancers on stage, Vanessa inquired whether Vitale or his handsome friend needed anything. Vitale introduced her to Nuzzo, and before long they were thick as thieves. They began spending time together, partying. Whether they were sleeping together, Vitale couldn't tell me. However, he was certain she was supplying Nuzzo with cocaine, weed, and pharmaceuticals. Although the amount of drugs may have been excessive, Vitale recalls, Nuzzo's habit was never an issue. He was one of the hardest-working brokers Vitale had met. "He seemed serious," warned James Cohen. Royce's drinking and cocaine use had caused him to cycle between alcohol-induced delusions and coke-fueled paranoia. It started with his unfounded belief that Vitale was going to screw him out of his share of the Lotto net commission, despite the fact that not 1 week had gone by that Vitale hadn't wired Royce his 50%. Both Royce's fiancée, Terry, and Vitale had tried to convince him to check into a rehab, but he wouldn't go. Eventually, his drug paranoia turned to anger, and Royce started making vague comments to Terry regarding physically harming both Vitale and Nuzzo. Then, over dinner with a mutual friend, James Cohen, Royce confessed that he believed Vitale was stealing from him and he was planning on killing him. Cohen immediately called Vitale. "I'm telling you, he's talking about having you killed or doing it himself." "Nah," replied Vitale. He insisted that Royce was all talk. "Do you have any idea how much money I'm making him? He'd have to be an idiot to do anything stupid." "Okay, I mean, he was pretty fucked up. He's definitely not thinking clearly." Around midnight, 2 weeks later, Vitale was about to exit the office when he noticed a lone vehicle near his new Ferrari California. There were 3, possibly 4 males inside. The parking lot was empty, with the exception of the 2 automobiles, as were the neighboring businesses. It struck Vitale as odd. He thought about Royce's threat, and his gut told him to be concerned. He stood inside, peering at the guys in the car outside. The more time that passed, the more certain he was that they were waiting for him to exit the building. Just after 2 a.m., they drove off. The next morning, Royce notified Vitale's probation officer that he was using cocaine. She called him in for a random urine test, which miraculously came back negative. "I called Royce and explained that if we couldn't come to some type of resolution," says Vitale, "I was going to stop sending him his half of the commissions. He could go open his own place. I was taking over the boiler room." That sent Royce into a full-blown frenzy, wherein he threatened to call the FBI and report the illegal kickbacks. But Vitale knew he was bluffing, since that would have opened Royce up to prosecution as well. Finally, Royce seemed to succumb to reason. He suggested that Vitale stop by his house so they could discuss the issue, work something out. "I thought maybe, just maybe, we could come up with a settlement and I could pay him off." Vitale confessed to me during one of our interviews, "I was so thrilled at the idea of getting Royce out of my life that when he said, 'Call me when you get to the subdivision,' I didn't think it was strange." Why Royce and his fiancée, Terry Coolidge, were arguing prior to Vitale's arrival will never be known. Royce has given numerous conflicting versions. However, based on the sequence of events, it's reasonable to infer that Royce intended to kill Vitale, a plan that Terry would have vehemently opposed. What I am sure of is this. On July 10, 2016, at approximately 10 p.m., Royce fired his AK-47 assault rifle, sending a round into Terry's chest, killing her immediately. Her body dropped to the living room floor. As Terry lied motionless on the hardwood in an ever-increasing pool of blood, Royce's cell rang. Vitale was minutes away. "Do me a favor," Royce said into the receiver. "Meet me in the back at the dock." But Vitale wanted to come in and say hello to Terry. He had pictures of his 4th of July shenanigans that she just had to see. "She's sleeping," Royce retorted, staring down at his former fiancée. "Don't come to the front door. Walk around back to the dock." The request struck Vitale as odd in connection with Royce's recent threats. "I don't know, Royce," replied Vitale wearily, turning his Ferrari into the subdivision. "Something's not right." "Bro!" spat Royce. "Just meet me around back." Vitale could hear the desperation in his disgruntled partner's voice as he swore, "I'd never hurt you. Terry loves you. You're like family." "Whoa, what the hell?" thought Vitale. "Who said anything about hurting me?" "All right, Royce, I'll be there in a minute," he said. But something was definitely wrong. Vitale called his girlfriend, mentioned Royce's request, and asked, "Does that sound weird to you?" "Are you crazy?" she snapped. "Get out of there! This guy's telling people he's going to murder you!" Vitale agreed it was a bad idea. He called Royce back and offered to meet him at a steakhouse up the street. Royce, however, got upset and insisted they had to meet at the house. He was adamant there was nothing to worry about. Everything would be okay if he'd just meet him at the dock. But Vitale knew better. He hung up, turned his car around, and headed home. That was the last time they spoke. The following morning, he received a call from a mutual friend, Angel. He informed Vitale that Royce had shot and killed Terry the night before. "I'm at the house right now," said Angel. "There are cops and crime tape everywhere. She's dead, man. I'm sorry. I know you liked her, but she's gone." Terry was a good girl, Vitale tells me. A pained expression takes a hold of him, and he informs me that she deserved better. She saw the best in people. She thought she could fix Royce, and he killed her for it. During the conversation with Angel, Vitale realized that Royce was going to murder him that night. There's no doubt in his mind. Although Vitale had gotten lucky, he knew it wasn't over. Understand, Royce was in a considerable amount of trouble, and, knowing Royce, Vitale was certain he would try to talk his way out of it. "I knew he'd cooperate," said Vitale, using the illegal commission as a way to lower his sentence. Vitale contacted his lawyer, who assured him that, at worst, it was a violation of SEC guidelines governing private offerings. He told me that these things were typically settled civilly. They hardly ever go criminal, so I wasn't all that worried about it. Shortly thereafter, Royce convinced a federal prosecutor that Vitale, Gray, and Nuzzo were conducting a massive scheme to defraud investors. That conversation sparked an FBI investigation into LottoNet. Joseph Martinez sat deep in thought on a grungy bed in the overcrowded Fort Lauderdale halfway house. At 50, Martinez, who insisted he be addressed by his street name, Rico, sported a gray ponytail and a muscular frame covered in crude prison tattoos and scars. He'd spent most of his adult life in and out of state and federal institutions for a variety of crimes. However, he was primarily a robber of banks and convenience stores. In fact, Rico had only recently been transferred from the Coleman Federal Correctional Complex to the Federal Halfway House in South Florida. Although Rico liked to brag that he had mad potential, in reality he was no more than a dim-witted thug with zero marketable skills. No sooner than he'd come to this conclusion did he grab his duffel bag of clothes, sign for a 3-hour pass, and walked out of the halfway house with no intention of returning. Now, I can't say for certain where Rico met Vanessa. It may have been a seedy bar or a high-end strip club. But I do know that shortly after absconding from the Bureau of Prisons custody, he and Vanessa hooked up. Rico had on a pair of thrift store jeans and a tight wife beater showing lots of ink. Vanessa, being a sucker for the thug life look, was taken by him immediately. They did a dozen lines of cocaine in a restroom, had sex in a toilet stall, and she decided he was a keeper. Vanessa could always use the muscle. Guys were always jerking her around regarding their outstanding debt. Days after she and Rico met, he was driving her charcoal gray 4-door Mercedes, making collections for his girl. Expand. That was Vitale's solution to the question of what to do once they completed the second half of the $10 million LottoNet raise. They completed the first raise, and by August 2016, Vitale, Nuzzo, and the team were $1 million into the next $5 million. At the rate the money was coming in, Vitale knew they'd hit their goal within months. But he had a plan. "Why not expand the LottoNet brand into South America?" he mentioned to Gray over dinner. "It's wide open down there." "Sure, but how?" Vitale's Colombian-American attorney, James Ivor's associate, Alex Alonso, had family in Colombia, a fluent family with mega connections throughout Central and South America. Vitale, Gray, and Ivor agreed that Ivor and Alonso would explore the viability of entering the marketplace.
Within days of their plane touching down in Colombia, the Colombian lawyer and his associate met the company that ran Colombia's lottery, Ghana, Spanish for you win, and they were very interested. Eivor and Alonso then spoke with the owners of the lotteries in Brazil, Costa Rica, Mexico, and Peru. Latinka, the company that held the exclusive license to run Peru's lottery, however, explained that although they were interested in a partnership, Latonet would need to be approved by the governing commission which oversaw the lottery, Beneficencia de Ica. Therefore, the Americans flew to Peru. Following Eivor and Alonso's presentation to Beneficencia de Ica, several of the commissioners expressed how impressed they were, not only with Latonet's proposal, but with the technology. The app gave everyone in Peru with a Wi-Fi connection the ability to play the lottery, potentially quadrupling the market as well as the revenue. "Tell me," asked one of the commissioners, "does anyone involved with Latonet have family in Peru?" The question seemed strange, but benign. "No," replied Eivor. "Is that a requirement?" "On the contrary. In fact, the government of Peru is so inundated with nepotism, corruption is rampant. So much so that it had spread to every branch including the private lotto company, Latinka. Although Latinka was making tens of millions of dollars in profit per month, the company hadn't paid corporate taxes in 12 years. Beneficencia de Ica hadn't canceled the company's exclusive license specifically because Latinka was generating $1.8 million per day in sales tax and the Peruvian government was afraid to lose the revenue. Understand, the company's license expired in 1 year. Unfortunately, there wasn't a competent company to take over the lottery that wasn't corrupt with family relations of one sort or another. However, admitted the commissioner, based on your presentation, I believe that Latonet could take Latinka's place. Is that something you would be interested in? The two Americans made eye contact for a split second, and Eivor replied, I believe our client would be very interested. The Beneficencia de Ica's commission's only requirement being complete financial transparency. If you can guarantee us that, we'll issue Latonet the license. We lost our minds over the Peruvian lottery news, confesses Vitale, while I scribbled a quote in my yellow legal pad. We are at our usual table in the prison's rec area, and he is elated at the recollection. Based on the news, Vitale convinced Gray that it would be in Latonet's best interest to make him a 22% partner in the company. Gray couldn't have agreed more. As such, Vitale immediately began upselling the Peruvians. He arranged for Latonet's license to include the exclusive rights to offer prepaid casino cards, slot machines, poker, blackjack, etc. Owning the license to Peru's lottery would give Latonet the credibility to either expand into other Central and South American countries or at least convince the other lotteries to partner with us on the Latonet app. Nuzzo and Vitale began discussing raises for Brazil, Colombia, Chile, Costa Rica, Mexico, Panama, Venezuela, and on and on. The investors went nuts when they heard the Peru news, Vitale says enthusiastically. They hadn't even started the raise and clients were trying to invest. I remember Nuzzo joked, I feel like I'm sitting in the garage with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. This is history-making. Detective Justin Dameron of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office Violent Crime Division stepped into the guest bathroom at approximately 10 a.m. on October 25, 2016. The room was dimly lit. However, the detective could clearly make out Frank Nuzzo's body laying in the bathtub. Oddly, he was clothed only in camouflage shorts with the pockets pulled out, as if having been searched. There were small puncture wounds in his left bicep, as well as several syringes lying haphazardly about the tile floor. Lividity had firmly established its presence. His pale, ashen skin and bluish veins only solidified the obvious. Nuzzo had been dead for days. There were used needles in the bathroom wastebasket, noticed the detective, and drug paraphernalia throughout the home. A white box of new syringes were found in an adjacent room, an orange bottle filled with cocaine, and numerous other items. Someone had scrawled the saying, keep doing, keep getting on the mirror with black spray paint. Although there was a plethora of evidence pointing to a simple drug overdose, when Detective Dameron spoke with Nuzzo's neighbor, Mark Joseph, he indicated that Catherine O'Brien, Nuzzo's fiancée, had left for Virginia several weeks earlier and, directly following her departure, there had been several suspicious individuals coming and going at all hours. Specifically, the neighbors described a white male and female.
They were driving a dark gray or black four-door Mercedes, he recalled. They looked like trouble. In fact, the couple was so out of place in the exclusive gated community of Artesa, Mark jotted down the vehicle's tag number. Surveillance footage would later reveal that the Mercedes last exited the front gate at 3:16 p.m. on October 21st, capturing both the male and female occupant's image. The vehicle and tag were registered to Vanessa Noriega. The following morning, the detectives spoke with Catherine. During the call, she admitted that Nuzzo had a serious addiction problem and stated his dealers were Vanessa, Rico, and a guy named Tony. I can give you their cell numbers. Catherine also pointed out she'd been through the house and discovered that someone had robbed the deceased. Over $30,000 in clothes and electronics were missing, in addition to $45,000 in cash. With this information in hand, on October 26, Detective Dameron called Vanessa to speak with her regarding Nuzzo's death. However, she was reluctant to talk, stating only that the deceased was doing a lot of drugs the last time I saw him. That's all I know. When were you last at his residence? Last Friday, October 21st, 2016. I left around 3 o'clock, she admitted hesitantly. Look, I can't talk to you. At that point, Vanessa ended the call. Understand that both Rico and Tony wouldn't return the detective's messages, and Vanessa refused to speak further. During the CSI investigator's search of the residence, they discovered a small caliber revolver, several live rounds, and one spent round, all of which were dusted for latent prints. That same day, Vitale was driving home when Catherine called and blurted out that Nuzzo was dead. Vitale hadn't spoken with him in nearly a week. Presumably, Nuzzo had been working out of his house on the South American LottoNet raises. Vitale was blindsided by the news. Catherine explained that the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office was investigating it as an overdose. However, Vanessa and Rico had been at the house on October 21st, and suddenly, nearly $80,000 in cash and valuables were gone, and Nuzzo was dead. The day before Nuzzo's funeral, Catherine stopped by Vitale's house. She was distraught over his loss. Nuzzo was a flawed individual, she admitted, but he didn't deserve to die. I know that Vanessa and that idiot Rico had something to do with it. Don't worry, replied Vitale, attempting to console her. They'll show up. They'll get what's coming to them. However, he didn't truly believe there had been anything sinister about Nuzzo's death. According to Vitale, Nuzzo had struggled with addiction, therefore Vitale assumed that he died in an addict's death. Shortly thereafter, Detective Dameron closed the case. Regardless of the robbery, the suspicious conversation with Vanessa, and the fact that several of the latent prints taken from the house belonged to a federal fugitive named Joseph Martinez, aka Rico, despite all the evidence to the contrary, the detective's report specifically indicated Nuzzo's death was an accidental overdose. Rico wore all black when he entered the Fort Lauderdale branch of Bank United at 2:40 p.m. on November 10, 2016. He casually slipped beside a female employee and grunted, "I'm here to rob the bank." He glanced around the lobby at the other patrons. "If I see one fucking cop, I'm going to start shooting customers." He motioned toward the teller stations, and the employee escorted Rico behind the counter. There, per his demands, she quickly emptied out the drawer. Rico inspected the money for GPS trackers and exited the bank. He got less than $1,200. At a Bank of America branch 4 days later, Rico once again forced an employee to hand over the cash in her teller drawer, slightly over $3,200. Then he exited the bank. On November 19th, Rico placed a single candy bar in the conveyor belt of a public supermarket, leaned into the cashier, and said, "Give me all the money in your register." The 19-year-old male cashier assumed Rico was joking. He chuckled at the demand. "I don't think so, bro." Rico then pulled out a knife, not a firearm, but a knife, and snarled, "Give me the money or I'll blow your head off." The cashier scoffed and refused to give up the cash. This sent Rico into a fury. He lunged forward and stabbed the teen in the upper chest, then turned and ran out of the supermarket. Less than a week later, he robbed the Lauderdale Lakes branch of Bank United. This time, however, he got away with nearly $3,800. "You give me a die pack?" Rico barked at the female Bank of America teller on November 25th. "And I'm going to start popping people off. You feel me?" She nervously nodded her understanding and handed Rico $28,000 of the bank's money, 9 bundles of $2,000, and one $10,000 bundle. Rico quickly stuffed the cash in his right pocket and exited the building. He climbed into a 4-door Mercedes parked just outside the bank and tore out of the parking lot. At the same time, a witness called in a description of the man dressed all in black and the vehicle, However, Rico immediately abandoned the Mercedes on a set of railroad tracks not far from the bank. While fleeing the scene, Rico seriously injured his knee. Shortly thereafter, the Broward County Sheriff's deputies discovered the vehicle. They quickly set up a perimeter of the surrounding neighborhood. At the same time, a tip was called in. The tipster stated he'd located a Hispanic male that matched the description of the bank robber. As a result of his injury, Rico had collapsed in the street outside the tipster's house. Sure enough, when the deputies arrived, Rico was sprawled out on the asphalt, unable to walk and reeling in pain, with $28,000 of Bank of America's cash in his right pocket. He was processed and transferred to the Miami Federal Detention Center to await trial. The press conference announcing LottoNet's deal with the Peruvian government was attended by Eivor and Alonso, as well as numerous department heads and, of course, the press. There were questions and official photographs. The announcement was front-page news. Vitale swallowed a mouthful of scotch. He was in shock. He and Gray were seated at a table in the Lobster Bar, an exclusive restaurant and bar in Fort Lauderdale, and Eivor had just called with the news. It was official. They'd been issued the exclusive rights to operate Peru's lottery. "I can't believe it," gasped Vitale. He slapped his glass on the face of the table. "We own the lottery! We own the fucking lottery!" Gray laughed. "This is amazing." The purported profit, based on the current numbers, were in the hundreds of millions, and the projected number using the LottoNet paperless system was in the billions. "You've taken LottoNet to a level I never imagined." Now, according to Vitale, is when the real work began. He began looking for additional office space, furniture, computers, etc., gearing up to take the completed U.S. LottoNet raise and repeat the process in every country in Central and South America. Just as things were about to kick into high gear, Vitale's probation officer called. She asked him to stop by the office the following morning for a random urinalysis test. It was no big deal. However, the next day, March 7, 2017, as Vitale pulled his Lamborghini into the probation office, his cell rang. "Don," blurted out one of his brokers, using Vitale's alias. The broker was sitting in his vehicle outside the office. "The FBI just raided the office. They're in here right now, dude." "Fuck," replied Vitale. Instinctively, he knew that the UA test was a ruse. He promptly swerved the Lambo around, pulled out of probation's lot, and punched the accelerator. "The FBI didn't arrest anyone," Vitale informed me. However, the agents did seize everyone's laptops and smartphones, in addition to the office computers, servers, and files. I knew I was in trouble. There was the alias, which was more unethical than illegal, and the kickbacks. At the very least, I'd violated my probation. Vitale spoke with his lawyer, Frank Meister. The attorney indicated that there had been a civil complaint filed, but it could, and most likely would, become criminal any day. Vitale decided that his best course of action was to go to Ecuador. "My girlfriend, Mariucci, had family there," he confides. As part of the license, LottoNet had opened a Peruvian corporation and a bank account. LottoNet Peru was already online and ready to go. Gary and I decided I could cross into Peru and run the LottoNet Corp, wait out the statute of limitations or negotiate a reasonable term with the federal prosecutor, probation or a fine or maybe even a couple of months jail time. The guy leaning against the support column near the boarding counter glanced at Vitale one too many times. The Miami International Airport terminal was busy on March 25, 2017. Travelers were rushing to make flights, waiting for their seats to be called, and checking carry-on bags. While Mariucci casually flipped through a magazine, Vitale was nervously looking from person to person. Sure enough, the guy near the counter snuck another peek at him, and Vitale's stomach began to churn. The airline's rep called Vitale and Mariucci's row, and they approached the counter. Simultaneously, the man leaning on the column started walking toward them, as did two other guys Vitale hadn't noticed. All three of them stared directly at him, and Vitale froze. The men converged on he and Mariucci. One of them thrust his FBI credentials in Vitale's face and asked to see his passport. "You won't be getting on that flight." "Why?" asked Vitale, feigning confusion. "What's going on?" "You're being detained," the agents replied, as a second law enforcement officer slipped a pair of handcuffs on his wrists, on a complaint filed in federal court. Vitale was processed and taken to the Federal Detention Center in Miami. He was placed in one of the facility's many housing pods with over 150 other prisoners. Days after his detention, Vitale was indicted for mail fraud by the U.S. Attorney's Office. The government was insisting that Atonement was a scam to defraud investors, a theory that Vitale's attorney was vehemently disputing. Regardless, due to Vitale's attempt to flee the country, the federal judge refused to grant him bond. Vitale's cellmate was getting a haircut, maybe a week or two into his incarceration, by another prisoner. A gray, ponytailed bank robber with bad ink work. A real chatterbox. "Yo, you look mad familiar," he said to Vitale as he ran the clippers on his cellie's head. "You from Lauderdale, bro?" "Yeah," he replied. Vitale introduced himself as Joe and extended his hand. "Me too," he laughed at the coincidence. "I'm Joe too, Joe Martinez." He took Vitale's hand and the two Joes shook. "But my friends call me Rico." Vitale recalled Catherine's description of Rico, and Vitale thought, "Holy shit, this might be the same guy." As a result, over the next month, Vitale made it a point to spend as much time chatting up Rico as possible. They began working out together, eating their meals together, and swapping stories. Initially, they had very little in common, but Vitale was patient. Then, one day in the recreation area, Rico mentioned, "I was fucking crazy over this bitch, V. You might know her. She hung out at a lot of them high-end strip clubs." "V?" replied Vitale. "Vanessa? I know a chick named V. She dealt coke and weed to a bunch of my guys." "Yeah, bro, that's my girl. She's a little firecracker." Rico then went on and on about how he used to do collections for her, and eventually they got onto another subject. A few days later, Vitale worked Vanessa back into the conversation, and Rico began rambling on about fucking this bitch until she couldn't walk straight, and how once he had to slap her ass around and drag her into a hotel room by her hair. As Rico told an endless parade of white trash stories, Vitale began to hate him. He decided Rico was scum, a lowlife. "V was a handful, bro," he grunted, and then admitted, "but she was down for anything." Rico grinned at a memory and said, "Next time you see her, just mention the word Artesa." Vitale immediately recognized the name of Nuzzo's gated community, and he asked its significance. "She and I did something there that would put us away for life, bro. Life." Suddenly, the correctional officer began yelling, "Lockdown! Lockdown!" It was 9:45 p.m., time for the prisoners to return to their assigned cells. As such, the conversation ended. Within an hour, Vitale was staring at the ceiling. He was now sure that Rico and Vanessa had something to do with Nuzzo's murder. However, he didn't push him for more details. Instead, over the next week, he made it a point to act fascinated by Rico and Vanessa's adventures in crime. Vitale egged Rico on, and eventually, when Rico was certain that he and Vitale were tight, he dropped his guard. "One time," he confessed, "we were partying with this rich broker, and at one point, the guy had to get some cash, so he goes into his closet." Rico explained that the broker had a hidden trap door where he kept a shitload of cash. V is like, "Let's rob this cocksucker. He owed her a ton of money, so I load him up, and then I give him a hot shot." "What's a hot shot?" asked Vitale. "I fucking OD'd the guy. I offed him." Rico explained that he'd escaped the halfway house, and there was a federal warrant for his arrest. "I needed cash to get out of the country. It was a nice come-up, but it wasn't enough, so I started robbing the banks." Whoa, wait a second, I interrupt. Rico confessed to giving Nuzzo a lethal injection? Vitale and I were sitting at a fiberglass table underneath a large awning in the prison's rec area. There are half a dozen flat screens mounted to a wall behind us. CNN is covering Special Counsel Mueller's investigation into Russian collusion. It appears President Trump may be in trouble. And I asked Vitale, "Did you contact the homicide detective?" "I thought about it," he replied, "but my lawyer said it'd be a mistake to get involved. It was my word against Rico's." According to Vitale, his attorney didn't want him to be associated with a murder, even if it were to implicate Rico in a homicide. "That's bullshit," I said. "Your lawyer's an asshole." The more likely explanation was that Vitale's attorney had been paid to defend against a fraud case, which he subsequently converted to a plea deal. He didn't want to take on additional work for the same fee. It had nothing to do with connecting you to a murder. In fact, I pointed out that Vitale's cooperation may very well have resulted in a sentence reduction. "I didn't want a time cut," he admits. More importantly, he explains, "I wanted Rico to pay for killing Nuzzo. Every time I looked at him, I wanted to punch that piece of shit in the face." On May 30th, 2017, Joseph Rico Martinez was sentenced to 151 months for bank robbery. Within a few weeks, he was bused to the medium security prison located at the Coleman Federal Correctional Complex. A month and a half later, on August 18th, Joseph Vitale went before the federal judge. Because a significant amount of the funds were recovered and Vitale's attorney was able to limit his loss to $2 million, Vitale was sentenced to 57 months. David Gray was subsequently sentenced to 51 months. Months after being sentenced, Vitale was then bused to the Coleman complex and incarcerated at the low-security facility, directly across the complex's parking lot from the Medium. He'd barely been at prison 3 weeks before he met me, on March 26, 2018, during our first day of class at the residential drug abuse program. That's where we started the story, sitting in the prison's cafeteria, but that's not where it ends. By June 2018, I'd finished with the outline of Vitale's true crime tale, tentatively titled Heavy Hitters, when he'd disclosed the murder. I felt good about the character development, story arc, and the conclusion, albeit anticlimactic. During the writing process, as well as the time we'd spent together in the drug program, I learned a lot about Vitale. Much like myself, he is a narcissist, self-assured, arrogant, selfish, and unconcerned with how his actions affect others. So much so, I was shocked when a mutual friend, a drug program peer, approached me on the last Thursday in May. One of the many exercises inmates participating in the drug program must endure requires them to allow the drug treatment specialists, DTS, to mail a letter to their families. In this letter, the DTSs request the inmates' loved ones to write a letter to them specifically describing how the inmate's addiction and crimes affected them, to detail the lies, the disappointment, the embarrassment, and the pain they'd caused. Listening to the inmates read those letters is gut-wrenching. I never heard one letter that didn't make me cry. Regardless, I couldn't imagine Vitale getting upset. Our mutual friend suggested I talk to him. He didn't go to lunch. He hasn't even left his cell since class. The letter, Vitale told me while we sat in his cell, was from his father. I thought, that I was successful. Nice cars, a big house, lots of money. I thought it was what he wanted from me. Vitale almost whispered. I had no idea how he felt. In his letter, Vitale's father laid out the numerous times his son had failed to return voice messages and emails. Vitale's habitual propensity to miss family gatherings, dinners, birthdays, and holidays. The humiliation his father felt after rearranging the entire family's schedule to ensure that Vitale could make it to Thanksgiving dinner, only to have him stand them up. Vitale teared up at the thought of his father's disappointment. He became emotional, much more emotional than I thought possible for Vitale. Your father loves you, I assured him. He knows you're a good person. Am I? Asked Vitale. He then rattled off multiple hard-hitting sales pitches he'd given potential investors, the names of numerous failed startups he'd raised money for, and the millions in lost investor funds. I wasn't concerned with them. The second those clients answered the phone, it was over. They didn't have a chance. I didn't know how to console him. All I could come up with was a tired cliché. It'll be all right. No, Vitale cut me off. You know that guy, Rico? He confessed to me, and I didn't even tell the detectives about it. I was too concerned about myself. I was too self-centered. Too fucking selfish. He killed a friend of mine and I didn't do anything. We sat in silence for several seconds and I whispered, It's not too late. Joseph Vitale, said the correctional officer working the drug unit. It had been a little over 2 months since he'd written Detective Damerow with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office Violent Crimes Division. In his letter, Vitale informed the detective that he needed to speak with him in connection with the death of Frank Nuzzo. Specifically, he told the detective that the overdose was in fact a murder committed by Joseph Martinez, a.k.a. Rico. By the time the correctional officer told Vitale he had to go to the Special Investigations Services office because the lieutenant wanted to see him, Vitale had forgotten all about the letter. He timidly entered the lieutenant's office. The chubby officer seated behind the desk motioned for Vitale to take a seat. He then dialed a number on the landline and told the person on the other end of the phone that he had inmate Vitale sitting in front of him, and he thrust the receiver to Vitale. Holding the phone close, he said, This is Joseph Vitale. This is Detective Justin Damerow. I understand you have information regarding the murder of Frank Nuzzo? Vitale swallowed hard. He thought about his father and family. He thought about the path of destruction he'd left behind, the wreck he'd made of his life. And for the first time in nearly a decade, he thought about doing the right thing. Yes, sir, he replied. I do. Joseph Vitale is scheduled to be released from prison in May 2020. To date, Joseph Rico Martinez has not been charged with the murder of Frank Nozzo. This has been Atonement, an interwoven tale of massive scams, murders, and the redemption of a con man by Matthew B. Cox, narrated by Brian Wiggins.